Now let's practice using direct and indirect quotations with this story that's in the back of the chapter about quotations and attribution. It's page 231 in the 12th edition, and it's number 1 here. It's going to be the first long fact set that you have. So this is fairly long, but it's going to be easy to write if you follow the directions that I gave you on the presentations where we discussed how to weave a story together, how to punctuate direct quotes and indirect quotes, and how to place your attribution. So take a few minutes, pause the video, and read this fact set. So now that you've read it, let's look at who your who's are, right? So you have 2 people in the story. You have Carlos Vicante. He's a police officer who has worked for 3 years in your city's police department. So let's give the city the name of your hometown, and that way you'll have a way to identify him. Now we can't say last night, remember, because that doesn't mean anything to our audience when you tell a story with the written word. So we need to, whatever last night is the night that you're going to give that. Now here's how you're not going to start it, right? You're not going to start it the way it started here. Last night he had an unusual experience. Why don't you just tell us what the experience is, and we'll go ahead and say, wow, that's super unusual, right? You're not going to start with his quotes, remember, because that's not going to mean anything to us. We need to know why he felt like that. What was going on? Why was there's somebody pointing a gun at him? What was happening, right? And so we need to know where he was, right? And let's go ahead. We actually don't have a place here. And so that would be a really obvious question to ask if you were going to do the story. So let's go ahead and we'll pick a place that we like around LSU. There's a place called Canes, capital C-A-N-E''S. So in fact, it's called Raising Canes, I think, officially, but we'll put him in that parking lot on Highland Road. So it's Highland Road. So, because there are several Canes, but if you go to LSU, most of the time people know exactly where that is. So let's go ahead and it'll be in that parking lot. Because your audience is going to want to know, where did this happen? Like, was it in my backyard or someplace close to me? So we need to tell them what happened. So also, as you read now, you see that he gets a call on the radio about a guy who is suspected from stealing from parked cars. And so he gets to the parking lot. Now, here's something important here. When he confronted him in the parking lot, he didn't know this fact, that the man is wanted for robbery and murder of a service station attendant in Tennessee. You know, that's pretty scary, right? Because Carlos Vicante did not know that, is not really that important to our story. That can go down at the bottom, that he found it out after the fact. However, when we write the story, we know that now. So that's important to us, to our audience. It ratchets up this confrontation a little bit more, makes it a little bit more scary. He didn't know it, but we know it, right? So if you're going to identify this man, to me, that's the identifier right there. Now, he's a suspect. We don't know his name. So what do we do about that? He's a man suspected of this. Once we get that out of the way, we can call him the man, pointed a gun, or the suspect, pointed a gun. And so that's kind of where we are right now with him, and that's okay. That's not going to be a problem. I don't know why we don't know his name. Maybe there's a reason why they haven't released the name, but we don't need to go there in the story. We're just going to go ahead and tell the story. So your lead is going to tell us who did what, when and where, and what happened. Now, one thing that's really important here, as you read through, you're going to find out that the man tried to shoot him, but never did. So how you start this is important. We need to know in the lead that Carlos Vicante never got shot. And so it has to be clear to the audience. So you can say, this guy tried to shoot this police officer, and we're going to delay ID him in the lead, right? So in the second paragraph, we'll give his name. Or this guy missed being shot, or narrowly missed being shot, or something like that. We need to know right away that he's okay. And that's what you're going to do, right? We need to know who this guy is, the suspect, and his biggest identifier is now what we found out, that he's wanted for murder of a service station attendant in Tennessee, right? So you can fit all of that in 35 words. The second paragraph, you're going to give us the police officer's name. Now, one thing that we need to know is how they came to be in the same place at the same time. And that's what you're going to do in your second paragraph, right? He got a call about somebody stealing from parked cars. And when he got to the Cane's parking lot, this guy pulled out a gun and fired a shot at him, right? So, because otherwise, we're going to wonder, how did they ever get in the same place? And that's important to think about when you tell a story. How did people get to be in the same place at the same time? If you were telling a story to your friends, that would have to be up at the top of it, right? Because that would be the first question. Well, like, why did you get in the same house? What were you doing there? If you're in trouble with your mom, right? That's going to be a question that she's going to ask you. What were you doing there anyway? So let's take care of that, right? Now, what you're going to do here is you're going to go through again before you do anything, and you're going to pick out 3 heart and head statements. That's going to be the key to your direct quotes. Pick out, there's some good ones in here, and they can be more than one sentence. In fact, if you have one statement, so here, I'll go ahead and pick one. Now, you don't have to pick this one. There are plenty to pick from. I remember his eyes. They were cold, the eyes of a killer. Now, that's 2 sentences. Remember, you're going to put your attribution after the first sentence in a multi-sentence quote. And you're going to put your quotation in its own paragraph, right? So we can highlight that. So that's one. And I call that a chunk again. I like that word. Don't limit it to one sentence if he had some other sentences after that. But I need context for that. That one would fit well once they have their initial confrontation. You're gonna tell the story in the first and second paragraph. We need to know what's going on and how they came to be in the same place at the same time. If you need a third paragraph to do some of that, that's fine. But by the time you get to the third or the end of the third or the fourth, then we can start to tell the story. And you can use some chronology here because it would make sense to do that. But give me some fact statements, something Vicante said that I could see. You can attribute it to him, but we're going to paraphrase what we could see if we were there hiding behind a car in the parking lot, right? So let's look at a statement like that. So he stopped him. He got out of the car and called to him. When he turned around, he saw a handgun in his waistband. He drew the gun and fired. He leaned to the right and dropped to one knee. All of those statements here, we can attribute to Vicante. We don't have to attribute each sentence, but maybe once in a paragraph, because we could see that if we were there. So that's not anything that is heart and head worthy. How he felt about it after, that it was a reflex that saved his life. Now, if I were to put that in there and paraphrase that sentence, I would attribute that to him because that's an opinion. We can't assume that reflex saved his life. We don't know that, but he knows it, and it's an opinion. And if I paraphrase it, I'm going to tell us he said it, right? So another thing too that's helpful, which I didn't mention, so what ultimately happened here? They found him, the Vicante and some officers found him at the door of a nearby house. And all of this happened in about a minute. This whole confrontation in the parking lot was quick. So that's worth mentioning toward the top of the story, or your second paragraph, or a third. And also, we need to know that this guy is still not roaming around with a gun. You need to do your audience a favor, and up at the top of the story, we need to know that he was arrested, right? And so you can even put that in your lead. Podunk City police officers arrested a man who tried to shoot this guy, right? So there's a lot of things that you can do. Even if you use passive voice, a man who tried to shoot this guy was arrested. That's passive voice, but in cases like this, it works, right? So think about how you're going to let us know who did what ultimately happened, and how they came to be in the same place at the same time, right? So that's got to be at the top of your story. And then we can begin to weave together our indirect quotes, tell us what happened that we could see if we were there. Then that gives us context. Then tell us how he felt and thought about that particular scenario. And that's a good way to weave together your indirect and direct quotes. Remember, direct quotes get their own paragraphs. And so go ahead and do this. It's not hard to do at all. I think you'll enjoy doing this story. If you have a question or run into a snag, make sure you let me know.